Okay, so let's go over rotation orders. This is rotation orders and gimbal lock. I'll do my best to explain this in a very short period of time, but it's maybe one of the more difficult ones. The good news is it only applies to joints that are other than hinge joints. So like your ball and socket sort of joints. It's like your shoulder and your hip and your wrist would be important to evaluate. Okay, so I'm going to switch out of component mode, press F8 on my keyboard, and I want to look at this shoulder joint. I'm going to switch to my rotate tool, shrink down my manipulator a little bit, and when I'm in my rotate tool, if I go to the tool settings by double clicking on the rotate tool, or coming up here to the top right of my screen and clicking on the little icon with the wrench in it, I want to make sure my rotate mode is set to gimbal. Okay, and that's key to helping you figure out this. Okay, and to save on making this a very long tutorial, I'm not going to explain this to the fullest. I'm just going to tell you what's important. Okay, and you'll have to take my word for it, and we'll have a discussion outside of the video if you want on why it's important. But the idea here, once you're in gimbal mode, is the rotates of all transforms. You have an X, Y, and Z rotation. And here's the rotate order attribute. And you can set this to different values. Well, it turns out that the rotates in Maya are in a hierarchy. So one of these rotates is going to be a grandparent. And then the next one is going to be a parent and a child of the grandparent. And then the next one is going to be a child and a grandchild. Okay? And that's what this rotate order resembles. Now, the whole reason that we even look at this is try to avoid gimbal lock. And so basically, if I were to rotate Z, this is good. The other two axes follow. But if I were to rotate in Y, the Z axis does not follow, but the X does. Okay? So what happens if I get this lined up? Say I did it even perfect, something like that. I can't rotate this direction now. Okay, so Maya says, kind of undercover, it starts to make decisions for you. And anytime Maya does that, animation becomes very difficult. Okay, so to show you the difficulty of that, I'm going to switch to my channel box. Actually, let me change my rotate tool to local, and then go to my channel box. And right now, I've rotated in Y. I'm going to make it an exact 90 degrees. Okay? So let's make this clear, I guess. So now, I really only have two axes of rotation. Okay, so I go back to local, channel box. And now, in this local mode, my manipulator shows me that I still have this axis to rotate with, when in fact I know that I do not. So if I were to rotate in Z, I want you to watch my rotate attributes over here. I think that I'm rotating in a single axis, but in actuality I'm not. Just by touching it, it put a 90-degree rotation on the rotate X and the rotate Z, and then it entered a new value in rotate Y. Now, that's the part we'll have to conceptualize outside the video. But that's a nightmare when you're animating. It's hard to know what's going to happen to your character if that's the situation. So we can avoid that by controlling our rotate order. So I'm going to switch back to my gimbal mode, my attribute editor. Now, the way that you can avoid that sort of scenario happening, probably the easiest way to try to figure this out is with just your bones, try to figure out how would you animate the character using just these bones. So the first thing, characters don't walk around with their arms out straight. Okay? The arms were going to need to be down by its side. So we want to rotate the arm down, and then we still want to be able to rotate the arm forward and backward, because that's the most common type of rotation for the arm. Okay? So even though we're in gimbal mode, we still have a rotate that can rotate the arm forward and backward. And so that is also good. Okay? Now, even after I rotate it forward, it would be nice as for an animator to be able to twist the arm. So I can do that. I can grab this X handle and I can twist the arm straight down its center. So this is all really good. Okay, and in fact, for the shoulder, if you did all the previous steps just like I described, the rotate order on the shoulder should be X, Y, Z. Okay, so take note of that. Now I'm going to undo, and I'm going to change this to something else just to show you how it would not work. Okay, so I'm going to switch to ZXY. I'm not even sure what's going to happen, but I'm going to try to do the same sort of move. I'm going to rotate the arm down. Sometimes these examples backfire on me, just so you guys know. So I rotated the arm down in Z, but the other two axes didn't follow. Now I want to rotate the arm forward and backwards, and I can do that using the X axis this time. Okay, so I have to use a different axis to do it this time. Okay, so that also worked. That's good. But now how am I going to twist the arm? It's not even possible. I cannot twist the arm from this point of view because there's no axes lined up right there. Okay, so that's the importance of rotate orders. So I'm going to switch this back. I saw that undo. So X, Y, Z is the rotation order that you want on a shoulder. Okay. Turns out the X, Y, Z is really good for a wrist also. Okay, so it's kind of the same scenario. The most common move for a wrist is going to be up and down, to move your hand up and down. It's the way it's most flexible. The next most common is going to be probably a twist, because we're going to use this joint to twist the entire forearm. Okay. And then the next most common would be side to side, which we really have very limited movement side to side with your wrist. Okay. Now the next ball and socket joint that we want to check is the hip. So the most common movement for a leg is to go forward and back. Okay. The next most common movement is going to be side to side. And the next most common movement is going to be the twist. And so XYZ also works for the hip. So this is a really simple rig to figure out. And that's exceptionally nice. Now, in the future, when you're rigging, you may have characters that don't work just like this, and so you'd want to know to set those appropriately. On all the other joints that aren't ball and socket, this really is a non-concern. But if you were ever having issues being able to rotate your character and only